Hiya, my name's Stephen Buchanan and welcome to Talking Shop, my first stand-up special for Radio 4. This is a nice job, but for the next 30 minutes I'm going to tell you all about my checkered work history and my home life over the past few years. Joining us from their own homes is our virtual audience. Thanks for being here, guys. Let me tell you about myself. I'm from Glasgow. Glasgow gets quite a violent reputation, and this is only based on stuff like statistics. We've been trying to change our ways in recent years. We've become gentrified. I read recently that Glasgow is currently the UK's stab capital, but also Great Britain's most vegan-friendly city. So basically, we'll stab you, but we draw the line at drinking milk. For those of you listening at home, I'm a small man. I'm 5'5.5". Once you get to that halfway point, usually round up, don't you? So we'll say I'm 6 foot. I think that's sound logic, but women off the internet disagree. All of a sudden I'm a catfish just because technically I'm not 6 foot or Latino. No, I'm not a catfish, although I am a 29-year-old man who still lives with his mum, so on paper it's not looking good. No, my mum's cool. The coolest thing she's done 2 years ago, she took in a refugee. He's a really great guy. I'll tell you a bit about him. I can't tell you his real name, but his nickname is Dove. Dove is 18. He's from Vietnam. He's really tall. I'm talking 5'6". He's a big boy, okay? People find it strange when I say that he's a refugee from Vietnam, because usually you associate refugees with fleeing war, right? He's fleeing persecution from people, not from war. He's not fleeing the Vietnam War, is what I'm trying to say. Another question people ask is, how did this come about? And basically, my mum's a social worker who's involved in this initiative called Supported Lodgings, which is an amazing project where you give a spare room to a young person who's been in care, and they stay with you until they're ready to move into their own place. That's what's supposed to happen anyway. However, judging by my mum's track record with me, he might never leave. When you take in a young person, they brief you on the background beforehand. With Dove, they sat us down, they said, listen, he's been through the mill, he was forced into slave labour, he was human trafficked in the back of a van, and now he's in Glasgow. As if that was part of the ordeal. As if he'd finally escaped from his captors, looked outside and went, oh, for crying out loud. So, yeah, I love living with my mum and I love living with Dove, but I think it's time to move on. I'm nearly 30. You know, there's something pathetically poetic about the fact that I'm recording my debut stand-up special in my childhood bedroom. I mean, if you told me that I'd be recording one of the biggest gigs of my life in the same room that I smashed up my PlayStation because I couldn't get past the first boss on Crash Bandicoot, then I'd believe you, because that was only last week. I have been applying for a lot of jobs over lockdown. I actually hit a new low recently. I reapplied for my old job in the co-op and I never got it. How depressing is that? Like, I've got years of experience in that exact role, in that exact shop, and they're still like, actually, I don't think you're a right fit for us, Stephen. That was my first proper job that I ever had. I say proper. I worked 8 hours a week across 2 shifts for 9 years. They were practically pushing me out the door. I didn't really enjoy my time there. The only perks of working in the co-op: 1, you get free plastic bags. Unofficial perk, don't tell my boss. And 2, you get 33% discount off funeral services that you're not allowed to use for your friends or family. Basically, the only perk of the job is waiting to die. You can tell you're in a job that you hate by the way you react to getting disciplined. When my boss disciplined me, I couldn't care less. Right, I got called in for being hungover. My boss was like, "Stephen, this is unacceptable. We're going to need to do something about this." I was like, "What are you going to do? Take away my funeral discount?" I'll try not to die anytime soon. And while you're at it, take away my free plastic bags. She was like, "What free plastic bags? Have you been stealing from us?" In the end, they just sent me home, and that was literally the best shift of my life. That is not a good reaction to getting sent home. You should be passionate about your job, you know. You should have the same kind of passion for your job that a rogue American police detective has. You know those like gritty dramas and they're like, "You're a loose cannon, Marciano. Hand in your badge and your gun." And he's like, "God damn it, Sarge, I'm just about to crack the case." And he's like, "You went too far this time, Marciano. Go home to your damn wife." And he's like, "But Sarge, this precinct is my home and I'm married to the job." I was never married to the co-op. If anything, we were seeing each other and they were way more into it than I was. When we decided to take in Dove, it was a really fast process. Literally, we agreed to it on the Thursday, and on the Friday, he was brought to the house by the police, who were a lot less enthusiastic about the job than TV would lead you to believe. They were like, "Stephen, yep, here's your refugee. Goodbye." I was like, "Is that it? I don't need to sign anything? I've had tougher Amazon deliveries than this." What would have happened if we weren't in? Just leave him with a neighbour, or I go round the back and he's sitting in the wheelie bin. In saying that, I would rather deliveries get left in the bin than with a neighbour. I don't know what that says about me as a person, that I would rather raid a bin than have a 10-second conversation with Brenda across the road. "Yes, Brenda, I'm aware that Brexit means Brexit. Can you just give me the refugee, please?" I guess different people have different perspectives on the situation. Like, a lot of people come up to me and say, "Stephen, don't you find it weird having him there all the time?" I'm like, not really. I'm 29 and I live in my mum's spare room. It's weirder that I'm there. I've heard neighbours going up to him asking, "What's it like living with a man-child?" Dove's like, "Shh, he can speak English, right?" I'd love to get my own place again, but I can't really afford it just now. That's why I've been applying for other jobs and stuff. And I'm in quite a weird place career-wise. Like, on the one hand, I'm doing my own stand-up special for Radio 4, but on the other, comedy clubs are literally illegal. Which means I've been given this amazing career opportunity, but nowhere to practice for it. Literally the only time I've spoke in front of an actual audience in the past 10 months was at a funeral. And a eulogy isn't exactly the best time to be trying out new material, right? I hope live performances come back soon, and I've been trying to stay creative in the meantime. Like, I started a podcast that's all about films, because that's what the world needs right now. Another straight white man telling him his thoughts on Donnie Darko. I guess I'm just putting off getting a real job, you know, because I don't think I could go back into customer service, to be honest. I've not got the right mindset for it. You need to go in with the mindset that customer is king, and for me it's more the customer is kind of an arsehole. Personally, I would rather no customer service when I'm shopping. In fact, I'd go as far as saying is that I'd actually prefer anti-customer service. Like, the ruder the staff, the better, honestly. Because it's a much more refreshing experience. The best anti-customer service I've ever had was when I was on holiday in Vietnam. I went to Ha Long Bay. It's a beautiful place, and I always wanted to visit there because it's meant to be one of the natural wonders of the world, and I wanted to visit it for myself and my 61 Instagram followers. The people demand content, and I'm going to give it to them, right? 12 likes, well worth the trip. When I was there, I booked this wee day trip from a travel agent. I say travel agent, it was a guy who sold excursions and fake football tops out the back of a van. And I say it was a day trip. It was neither a day nor a trip. It was an hour-long tour of a temple directly opposite my hotel. I was so angry about this, right? I went up to the guy, I was like, I thought you said this was a day trip. And he said, I did say that, but I only said that because I wanted to make the sale. He said, think about it. You wouldn't have bought it if I told you it was a waste of money. So I made it sound good. Which made you want to buy it. I was like, he's got me there. I wouldn't have bought it if he told me it was a waste of money. I can't argue with that. Never have I been so confused and impressed in all my life. But like, I understood what happened, I just didn't understand why it happened. So I said, why did you tell me this? And he gave me the best excuse I've ever heard in my life. He said, well, sometimes in Vietnam, we tell you what you want to hear, even if it's not true. Chef's kiss. I mean, that is anti-customer service at its finest, right? I just shook the guy's hand there and then. I said, enjoy the £3, mate, you've earned it, right? In fact, I'll take a football top while I'm at it. Yeah, the one with Cristiano Ronaldo on the back. I'll take that. I could only dream of doing that to a customer in the co-op. Imagine that, coming up to me all angry, like, excuse me, son, I bought this old El Paso fajita kit, but it turns out you can't actually make any fajitas with it. And I'm just like, well, sir, you wouldn't have bought it if I told you it was actually a box of lies, would you? I'm well aware that it says just add in size 1 font at the bottom of the box and then proceeds to list every single ingredient you need to make a fajita. But I'm afraid sometimes in the co-op we tell you what you want to hear, even if it's not true. The job search has been pretty soul destroying though. It's hard when you don't actually want any of the jobs that you're applying for, because there's no sense of consistency. Like, in the same day I applied to be a senior copywriter at Google and a retail assistant at Dixon's. A shop which I am almost 100% certain went out of business about 10 years ago. That's like me saying, yeah, I just applied to be a trolley boy at Safeway. Yeah. Got a good feeling about it, actually. But if I don't get that, I've still got the interview at Woolies to fall back on. Dove was recently granted his leave to remain, which is great because it means that he can start to think about a career and build up his own life in Glasgow. Because he's at college just now, but like me, he's also looking for a job to tide him over. So I've been trying to help him out with that, which is probably to his detriment, if anything. I've not exactly got the greatest work history, right? In fact, on paper, it sounds absolutely insane. Here is a quick breakdown of all the jobs I've had. Customer service assistant, stand-up comedian, Zoom comedian. 2 different things. Human ping pong ball, which is not as sexual as it sounds, don't worry. Exam invigilator. I don't know how... A few invigilators in the house, good. I don't know how I got that job. I did not fit in whatsoever. The fact that I was 19 and I brought the average age of the other invigilators down by about 60 years should have been the first red flag. I've also been a meet and greet, a donut delivery boy, and a Christmas elf. That was actually the easiest interview I've ever had. It was literally just, Stephen, what are your strengths? I'm 5'5.5". You've got the job. The worst job I've ever had actually sounds the coolest. For a brief spell in high school, I was an official test purchase officer for the Strathclyde Police, which is a fancy way of saying that I was a wee grass. Basically, the police gave me money to go into shops to buy alcohol for them, as an informant, not because they forgot their ID. And I went to a rough school in Glasgow, so this was suicide. Even the teachers were going, snitches get stitches, Buchanan. I'd be crying my eyes out, like I'm telling my mum, they're going, ugh, there's a surprise. Once a grass, always a grass. Like I say, Dove's been looking for jobs as well, so I've been helping him with his CV, which sounds farcical given everything that I've said in the show so far. But believe it or not, my CV game is great, right? On paper, I am an absolute catch. It's just when they meet me in person, it's a disaster. It's easy to sell yourself on paper. All you need to do is pander and lie. Right? Literally the first sentence on my CV is, my greatest passions in life are making others laugh and customer service. They eat that up. Dove's actually been trying to help me with my CV as well. He told me that on my list of employment I should put down that I'm a carer for him, because technically when my mum's out of the house then I'm in charge. It's quite sweet in a weird way, but to be honest, I didn't feel comfortable putting that on because we don't really have that kind of relationship. It makes it sound like whenever I spend time with him, it's for work, when it's absolutely not, because we've got a great friendship with lots of common interests. We go to the football together, we watch the games on the telly, we play FIFA. We've got one interest, but still... I know it sounds cheesy, but I'd even say that he feels more like a wee brother to me than anything else. And then I said all that to him, and he said to me, well, you've also never been skiing, but you still put that in your CV. Fair point well made, bro. Secondary carer. It's been great having Dove here, I've loved it, but don't get me wrong, it's not all plain sailing. There's the obvious language barrier, which isn't even that big of a deal. You know, people say, oh, it must be a nightmare trying to communicate even the smallest of things. Not really, we still understand each other for the most part. He's not walking around pointing to his mouth and rubbing his belly, and we're like, what on earth could it possibly mean? I hope we find out soon, because he's been like this for 3 days now. You know, explaining cultural things is a bit more difficult. You know, things like I can't just explain to by pointing. Like Western stuff that he's never had any experience of. For instance, on the first day he arrived in Scotland, it was Halloween. Have you ever tried to explain Halloween to a refugee without sounding like a creep? It's impossible, right? I had to sit him down. I was like, listen, there's going to be a lot of children coming to the house. And they're going to get dressed up for us. Not for us, for society. And then you invite them in, give them some sweets, and let them attempt to drown themselves for an apple. And he's going, sorry mate, I'm not following you here. I was like, listen, it doesn't matter. I'm just telling you why the door is going to be going all night whilst we sit in the dark with the blinds closed. think Dove's at that pivotal age where, he doesn't really know what he wants to do, and he'll figure it out eventually. It just takes time. Personally, I think he could be a social worker or a carer, like following my mum's footsteps, because he's also one of the kindest people that I've ever met. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, my mum came up to me and she was like, "Stephen, he's brought home a bird." And I was like, "Oi, oi, what a lad." Has he been learning from his Uncle Steve, has he? And she said, "It's a pigeon." I was like, each to their own. Who am I to judge? She said, "What happened was a baby pigeon fell out of its nest. He's found it. He's brought it into the house. He's going to look after it until it can learn how to fly, and then he'll put it back into the nest." And I was like, "Oh, that's disgusting." He's brought a pigeon into the house? We've just got a pigeon in the house at all times now. A pigeon. Just a 60-year-old mum, a 29-year-old son, a refugee, and a pigeon. Sounds like the start of a problematic nursery rhyme from the 70s. And she was like, "Oh, don't worry, it won't affect you." I was like, "He's using the sieve as a wee nest for it. Of course it's affecting me. I'm never eating pasta again." Right? I really wasn't comfortable with it because pigeons get a bad press, right? People hate pigeons. When are you ever at a wedding and at the end they release a bunch of pigeons? Doesn't happen. But then he reassured me and he said, "Stephen, don't worry, it's not a pigeon, it's a dove." And I was like, "Oh, well that's fine, Doves are cool. Doves are the bird of peace, the bird of hand wash." And just like that, my perspective was completely changed just with that one word. It was the same animal, but all of a sudden it didn't seem so scary. So we looked after this bird for a few weeks and it finally learned how to fly, and it was a beautiful moment. And as soon as we put it back into its nest, he said to me, "Stephen, you do realise that was actually a pigeon, don't you?" I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, that was definitely a pigeon." I was like, "Why did you tell me it was a dove?" And he said, "Well, sometimes in Vietnam, we tell you what you want to hear. Even if it's not true." Before I go, I want to tell you one last story about my last ever shift in the co-op, right? It was quite a weird day. It was quite intense. I served this Nazi. I think he was a Nazi. He had a skin head, swastika tattoos on his knuckles, Morrissey t-shirt. All the telltale signs, And it took me a minute, but I recognised him. It was a guy that I used to go to school with. He was a horrible person, right? He was the school bully. Everyone used to call him Toad because he looked like a toad. But then we found out he could fight, so we just called him Paul. I hated Paul, right? He used to do stuff like steal people's shirt pockets. Don't know what he was doing with all these bits of material, right? He'd just go up to you, steal your shirt pocket, put it in his pocket, and go, "I've got your pocket in my pocket." I was like, "You're a psychopath. Please get out of my garden." Right? And I told my mum about this, right, because I'm a wee grass, and she said, "Stephen, don't worry, in 10 years' time, you're going to be rich and famous, he's going to be in jail, and you will have the last laugh." And I said, "That's what we're going for here, Mum, the 10-year plan." You can't phone the school or anything. Now I'm serving him in the co-op, and he was buying a newspaper, right? On the front, it was some inflammatory headline about how there was swarms of refugees coming into Britain. So he started going off on this big racist rant, and I didn't want to listen to it, so I said, "Listen, I've got a refugee living in my house, and I don't appreciate the stuff you're saying. Can you please leave?" His face went chalk white, which I thought he would have been delighted about. apparently not, you know. He just started getting even angrier, right? He started saying all these awful things. He was like, that's disgusting. How do you know he's not one of those suicide bombers? I was like, because he's still alive. It's the biggest clue here, mate, right? It got to the point where he actually threatened me. Now, I know I sound like a hard man nut job, but I've never been in any fights in all my life. I've never been in any dangerous situations. I mean, I was attacked once by asthma. Having your life threatened by a dusty loft doesn't mean you can go and fight a Nazi, right? So in that situation, it's fight or flight, and usually I'd be right out of there, but for the first time in my life, I stood up for myself, and I can't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of, if I ever see you again, you're getting stabbed. And I just said, go for it, mate. I work in the co-ops, I'll get 33% off my funeral. It was soon after that I finally quit and decided to become a full-time stand-up, and it's honestly been the best job I could ever have hoped for, and doing shows like this is an absolute dream come true. So genuinely, thank you very much for listening. And if you're wondering, actually, Dove has actually got his first interview for a job. And he said that he's actually got me to thank for it. And I said, oh, why is that? And he said, because without you, there wouldn't have been a vacancy going at the co-op. You're welcome, bro. I've been Stephen Buchanan. Thank you very much for listening. Talking Shop was written and performed by me, Stephen Buchanan. The producer was Adnan Ahmed, and it was a BBC Studios production.